All right, everybody, what's going on? And welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk. This is the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. See what else coming at you. And we are continuing our 12 team previews as we make it to team number 4, the Bethune-Cookman University Wildcats. We are, like I said, we are already 4 teams in to this preview series. 8 more to go after this. We'll conclude this series right up until the week of the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Looking to be done with this by that Wednesday, and then probably Friday. That Friday we'll have a preview of the MEAC SWAC Challenge. So if you want to find out when your favorite team preview is dropping, you can hit my Twitter account, SWAC Talk 76. I have a pinned tweet on that lists the date of every preview. Those dates are not necessarily set in stone because sometimes life happens and things move around. But that's the date that I'm shooting for each team. Sundays and Wednesdays are the days these will be dropping, unless something happens. But for the most part, Sundays and Wednesdays will be the date that they drop. Also hit the rest of the socials are Facebook is SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76, Instagram SWAC Talk. Like the video, comment, and share your thoughts on this Bethune-Cookman team, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're continuing to grow. Thank you for subscribing already. If you've done so previously, if you haven't, then hit that button, man. It don't cost nothing, and we definitely appreciate anything that in terms of subscribing. We definitely appreciate it. So like I said, we got this video dropping today. And since you're watching it, and Sunday will be our FAMU video. Next Wednesday will be Grambling, and next Sunday will be Jackson State. Thursday, SWAC Smoke live 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. So don't forget to check that out as usual. So let's go ahead and jump into this, man. We're gonna go ahead and look at these Wildcats of Bethune-Cookman, coming off of a 3-8 season, 2-6 in conference. That's a 1-game improvement overall. Another 2-6 finish in conference. I think that's like the 3rd year in a row. They've been 2-6, but they did win another game non-conference, so they finished 3-8. The outlook to me is still going to be one of growth and development. I know that a lot of people are making this team like a dark horse, not necessarily to win the division or anything like that, but a lot of people are really, really high on this team, and I can understand. But I'm going to share my thoughts on the 24 season. But before we get into that part, we're going to look at the 23 season. This team was a mixed bag. Offensively, they weren't explosive at all. Didn't really generate a lot of points. Defensively, they were a lot better than a lot of people thought, including myself. Coming into the 23 season, I felt like the defense had to improve because their defense was really, really poor in 22. And this defense got better. They were a very scrappy unit. Didn't really give up a lot of points. This team didn't really get blown out in a lot of games, especially when you look at SWAC play. They didn't really get blown out much. And that's really a testament to the defense, because the offense really, whether it was injury, quarterbacks, or just, lack of explosion and lack of big plays, all consistency moving the ball, they just really struggled offensively to generate much. And their defense really helped them a lot in these games. So when you look at their point totals in conference play, they scored 16 against Jackson State. They gave up 22. They scored 14 against Bama State. They gave up 19. They had a high-scoring game against TSU. They lost their game 34-31. They gave up 28 points to Southern, scored 18. They gave up 28 points to Grambling, scored 14. Beat Valley 20-7. Scored 31 against Alabama A&M and allowed 14. Then they gave up 24 points to FAMU in the Florida Classic and only scored 7. So their defense really, in conference play, the most points they gave up were 34 to Texas Southern. They really were a solid unit defensively in conference play. They did give up 48 to Memphis and 56 to Memphis and 48 to Miami, but those are FBS games. And then they had a 6-point game against Savannah State. This team only scored 31 points as a season high. They did that 3 times. So when you look at a unit that only scored over 30 points 3 times and 31 was the max, other than that, they only scored more than 20 points one other time. So this team didn't really cross the 20-point mark but 4 times out of 11 games. And for the defense to keep them in those games really goes a long way to show how scrappy this unit was. This offense was 10th in the league in scoring at 18.5 points per game. They were 6th in scoring defense at 26 points per game. Total offense, they were 11th at 260 yards per game, average 4 yards per play, had 23 total touchdowns. Total defense, they were 8th at 377 yards per game, allowed 5.8 yards per play, and 33 total touchdowns. Their rushing offense was 9th at 125.5 yards per game. They had 14 touchdowns, average 3.4 yards per carry. Defensively, they were 8th at 168 yards per game on the ground, 4.5 yards per carry, 25 total touchdowns. Passing offense, they were last at 138 yards, 134.8 yards per game, 9 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Defensively, they were 9th at 209 yards per game allowed, 8 touchdowns and 9 interceptions as a defense. When you look at their sack numbers, they allowed 33 sacks, which was 9th in the league, and their defense registered 22 sacks, which was 8th in the league. Third down conversion rate, they finished 10th at 31.1%. So as you can see, they really struggled to extend drives. A lot of stalled out drives. Couldn't really move the ball consistently to put points on the board. Defensively, they were 3rd in third down defense at 33%. So you have an odd mix of a team that got off the field on defense but couldn't stay on the field on offense, and eventually that wears a defense down. Fourth down offense, they were 2nd at 68%, 13 to 19. So they did find some success converting fourth downs. Fourth down defense, they were 60%, 12 or 20. So they kind of did have some drives extended on them that way. And as you can see, the offense just really, kind of struggled to find a way to make things happen. A lot of that was injuries at the quarterback position. They played 4 quarterbacks all season. And those guys, never really found a rhythm. Nobody played more than 9 games at the quarterback position. So nobody really found any rhythm. All those guys are back. Luke Sprague, he finished the season with 544 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Walter Simmons, 496 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Talik Bethea, 369 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Walter Simmons was a guy who could use his legs. He was the 2nd leading rusher on the team, and he's the 2nd leading returning rusher on the team with 308 yards on the season, 4.3 yards per carry, and 5 touchdowns. Jimmy Robinson, the 3rd, leads the team in rushing, and he's the leading returning rusher with 558 yards, 3.6 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. When I say this team doesn't really have a lot of explosiveness, the longest run on the season was 52 yards. And other than that, they had a 47-yarder, and nobody else really had anything. They had a 58-yarder as the season long, 52, 47, and then everything else was below 30. So not a lot of explosive runs. Same thing in the passing game. The longest pass on the season was 43 yards. So they just could not hit big plays. They lose their top 3 receivers. Amari Stewart is the leading returning receiver. He had 12 catches for 122 yards and a touchdown. He had the 43-yarder, which was the season long for the team. Defensively, they also lose some guys, but they return their leading tackler, Darius Thomas. He was an all SWAC preseason candidate, 97 total tackles. Also led the team with Also is the leading guy in tackles for loss returning, 12 and a half. Adrian Hall is the leading guy returning in sacks at 3. They lost some key guys on their defensive line and in their linebacker core. So they're gonna continue. This is a continuous rebuild for this team. They did bring in a lot of guys out of the portal, but how those guys are gonna mesh with the rest of the guys that are there, and they recruited pretty solidly in high school. So that's definitely gonna be something to look at. Um, One of the key names that's coming in is Raymond Woody the third. Obviously, that's Coach Woody's son. He played at Florida State and at Cal, and now he's at BCU. I think he's going to take a strong leadership role on his team, especially from his safety spot in the secondary. I think he's going to help try to mold this unit. Like I say, they have some guys who can make some things happen. They just don't really have enough, at least in my eyes, right now, to really feel confident, really putting them in any high spot at this point in the season. Anthony Frederick is the leader punter. He had a 41.1 yard average with a longer 62, had 11 punts fair caught and 16 punts inside the 28, 50 plus yard punts on the season. This team did block one punt, and they had one punt blocked themselves. Cade Hector with 7 of 11 on field goals with a long of 45. He was 2 or 3 from 40 to 49 yards, so that's definitely a nice weapon to have. When you have offense that can't really generate a lot of points, having a guy that can actually kick and score points for you that way can definitely help. They don't have anybody returning in the punt return game from last season. They only returned 7 punts on the season for 33 yards, average 4.7 yards per return with a longer 13. So they didn't really have a lot there. Darnell Dees returns as the kick return guy. Had a kind of off season last season. Only returned 13 kicks for 298 yards, average 22.7 yards per return with no touchdowns. This is a guy who can definitely break them at any time. So having a weapon still there is always going to be a key factor for this team, especially when you don't really score a lot of points. You need to find those yards and points on special teams because right now there's just not much there. The key thing, though, to me, the key thing for this team, obviously offensively, is to continue to develop the offensive line. Giving up 33 sacks, you just don't want to do that. And some of that is because you played so many different quarterbacks, different guys, just kind of not really being able to find any consistency there. Quarterback is definitely a big issue. There's plenty of numbers at that position. You have Cam Ransom, who did not play last season, who was expected to be a big factor in the offense. You have Simmons, Sprague, Bethea, and you're adding Micah Bowens, who went to Oklahoma and then went to Charlotte. Hadn't really played much. Only played in one game at Charlotte last season. Didn't really register any passing stats. So that's another body to this quarterback room, and that's another guy who hadn't really played much. So now you have a glut of quarterbacks, and you need to find somebody out of that group and keep them healthy. The offensive line is definitely a big factor in keeping these guys healthy because as the season goes on and these guys are taking shots from getting sacked, you're putting guys, in harm's way. The running game really should help that if they can continue to stick with that. They really have to, I think they have to commit. I think they really should be a team that, maybe commit to running the ball a good bit. They actually were third in the league in rushing attempts. So it wasn't through lack of effort. They ran the ball 410 times last season, which was third in the league. So it wasn't through lack of effort to run the ball. They just couldn't really do it successfully, and some of that is the offensive line, some of that is just the style of backs that they had, and some of it is play calling. So you want to kind of keep that number high. I think you really still need to be a team that is run first. Um, and they were like middle of the pack in passing attempts at 306. So they ran the ball far more than they threw it. You might want to try to balance that out a little bit, but I still think the running game is going to be the key to this team because you don't have at least experience wise in the SWAC. You don't really have any guys outside that's going to really scare teams. So you need to. I think you need to kind of control the clock and give your defense some time to rest. So I would love to still see a commitment to the running game and just continue to develop somebody at quarterback. Like I said, there's so many new faces from this offseason. You're still going to be molding and melding this unit. Turnovers were a big problem last season. They were -6 in the turnover margin, so you want to obviously improve that. When you turn the ball over and you can't score, that's just a recipe for disaster. They have to, whether it's through scheme or just somebody stepping up, they have to find some explosiveness on offense. You have to hit big plays. The SWAC is a big play league. If you can hit big plays, you're definitely going to change some things for your team. There's still a lot of unknown for this team, at least for me. I think they're moving in the right direction. I feel even though I don't have a concrete feel on this team, I feel a lot better about them coming into this season than I did coming into last season, which probably isn't saying that much, but I do think they're heading in the right direction. I think they're recruiting well, and I think they're trying to lay that foundation. I just don't know how much success you can get from that right now. So that's the biggest issue to me is I just don't know. Like I said, when you have a team that didn't win a lot of games last season and you losing a bunch of guys and you bringing in a bunch of guys, there's no real continuity there. There's no real, program to work off of. So I always err on the side of caution there. Sometimes, you get those guys, that step up and become, big ballers for you. But you just right now, I just can't say. But I do think they're moving in the right direction. Looking at the schedule doesn't really do them a lot of favors. Their first 3 games are extremely hard. You have USF, who is an FBS game. You have Mercer, who is a team who went 9-3 last season and made the playoffs. So that's a solid matchup. This is a team that they win the playoffs and they won a game in the playoffs. So they did get bombed in that loss to South Dakota State, but they did win. They did win a playoff game. So you kind of expect this team to be somewhere in the mix there. And then then your next game is at Western Michigan. So FCS playoff team and 2 Power 5 and 2 FBS teams, not Power 5, 2 FBS teams is a rough early start, especially for a team that is gonna be, still breaking in a lot of new pieces. You do get Clark Atlanta at home. That's your second home game because you get Mercer at home, so maybe you can work some home magic. But I'm seeing an 0-3 start right there. I do think you beat Clark for your first win. Then you get Bama State at home. Had a really, really tight game with Bama State. Honestly, probably should have beat them last season because you got the ball inside the 20-yard line like twice toward the end of the game and came up short. Couldn't score. But, Bama State's expected to be better on offense this season. Defensively, I think they're going to still be good. Maybe not as good as last year, but I think they'll still be good. So this is going to be a tough challenge. But, playing at home, it's always, strange things can happen. But I think they dropped that game. And then they go to Alabama A&M. on October 12th. So they get a bye week after the Bama State game. They go to Alabama A&M, who they beat last season in a game where that running attack really came alive. So there's not a cut and dry game. I'm going to put this maybe not a 50-50 toss up, but maybe like a 60-40. I still like Alabama A&M a lot. So I think they'll win that game at home. Then on October 19th, you go to Valley, or I left all my slides. Y'all forgive me. I got on a roll. October 19th, you go to Valley. That's always a tough game at Valley. You just never know sometimes with Valley. But I think, Bethune-Cookman, I think they may be a couple steps ahead of Valley right now. So I do think they can win that game. Those teams have traded wins, in previous years, but I think the Wildcats can get that one. And then you got a tough stretch, a tough 3-game stretch coming up after that. You get Jackson State at home, which is your homecoming game. Last year, you played JSU really close last year. Had a game where you probably could have won that game if some things fell your way. I think JSU this season is probably going to be a bit better. I think they're more experienced with Coach Taylor and his staff. I think the offense is going to be really good this year. Defensively, I think they're going to be in the mix there. So I think there's going to be a tough game for Bethune-Cookman. Then you get Grambling at home. So 2 games at home back to back. November 2nd. Grambling last season had, they jumped out on Bethune-Cookman early and kind of, held on and won by a couple scores. Grambling, they have a really good quarterback coming back. A lot of new pieces going to be that, new coaches. So this game, I don't. Again, it's kind of like the Alabama A&M game. It's not a 50-50 toss up, but you can probably consider it to be a toss up. But I do think Grambling wins that game. Southern, same situation. That's a road game in Baton Rouge. Southern, a lot of questions. Same thing happened with Grambling last season. Southern kind of jumped out on Bethune-Cookman. They scored a late touchdown, make the margin a 10-point game. But I think Southern will find a way to win that game. It won't be pretty on either side. Then they go to Texas Southern, which I think is a game that they should win. And they close out with the Florida Classic against FAMU. They're going to give it everything they got. Last season, they battled their butts off and just couldn't get over the hump. I think they'll battle this season. So I don't think they'll get it, but I think they're going to battle and fight against FAMU and come up short. So I think this is going to be another 3-win season, 3-9, 2-6 in conference. That's not pretty. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not pretty. But I do think the potential is there for a 5-7 season. I'm putting that as my ceiling, 2-10 as my floor, because I do think if you flip Southern, Grambling, and Southern and Grambling, or if you flip 2 out of the 3 between Southern, Grambling, and Alabama A&M, that's going to give you 5 wins. There's a possibility you could win all 3 of those games, depending on how you're playing. So if you do, then that's a 6-6 season. I don't really feel confident that they'll win all 3 of those games. I do think if they can, I think they can win 2 out of those 3, and that puts them at 5-7. So it's not outside the realm, but I think a lot of things are going to have to come together for this team to push for a 500 finish. I don't think they'll finish worse than 2-10 because I think that the foundation is there. I think the talent is there. I just don't know how much is there right now. I don't know how much is been molded together. But I think the possibility is there more. I think there's more positivity than negativity for this team. So even though I didn't predict them to have a great record, I think this team is going to be better than they've been. I do think they have the ability to challenge for a 500 record. I'm not confident enough to put them there. But I do think 3 or 4 wins is in the mix. So I feel very comfortable with 3 or 4 wins in the mix right now. So um, that's Bethune-Cookman. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. See Wells signing out, and I'm gonna catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.